You ever notice something even deeper about this business? Landlords don't just deal with bad outcomes. They're actively shaping behaviors that create those outcomes without even realizing it. And that's uncomfortable to hear, but it's true because most landlords believe they're reacting to tenants, when in reality, tenants are responding to the landlord's system. And if the system is inconsistent, slow, unclear, or based on mood instead of structure, then what you're seeing in your property is trained behavior, not random behavior, not bad luck, not just how tenants are. They're trained. And once you see that, you can't unsee it because now every situation starts to look different. That late rent payment doesn't just show up, it followed a pattern. That ignored issue didn't come out of nowhere, it followed a pattern too. That tenant who suddenly changed didn't change suddenly, they adapted to what you allowed, what you delayed, what you didn't define, and how you responded over time. That's the part landlords miss. They look at the moment something breaks instead of the pattern that built it. And that's why they stay stuck, because they keep trying to fix outcomes instead of correcting behavior. And behavior doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to patterns. Let's go back again, but deeper this time. Because last time we talked about authority and consequence. This time, we talk about control. Back when land was tied directly to survival, control wasn't optional. It was constant. If you lived on land that wasn't yours, your behavior had to match expectations immediately. There was no space to drift, no room to test boundaries slowly, no time to interpret things your own way because the structure was always present, visible, felt, and consistent. And again, it wasn't ethical by today's standards. It wasn't fair. It wasn't humane in a lot of cases. But it was clear. And clarity is what controls behavior. Not kindness, not communication, clarity. You knew exactly where the line was, and you knew exactly what happened if you crossed it. Now, today, we remove that level of control, rightfully, but what replaced it? Policies, processes, paperwork, systems that exist on paper. But what about behavior? And that's where everything broke. Because now control isn't constant, it's occasional. It shows up when something goes wrong, then disappears again. And what does that train? Inconsistency. A tenant reports something and gets a fast response one time, then a slow response the next. Now they don't know what matters. A tenant is corrected strongly in one situation, then something similar gets ignored later. Now they don't know where the line is. A tenant sees an issue sit for days, then suddenly become urgent later. Now urgency doesn't make sense. So what do? They adjust. They stop treating things as important until you do. They stop reporting early because early doesn't change anything. They stop reacting quickly because you don't react consistently. They don't become worse tenants. They become accurate reflections of the system they're in. That's the part that hits because now it's not about what they did, it's about what you trained. And once that pattern sets, it compounds. Small delay turns into a normal delay. A normal delay turns into expected delay. Expected delays turns into behavior. And behavior becomes cost every time. So now when something big happens, a major repair, a major issue, a major breakdown, It feels like it came out of nowhere, but it never does. It followed the exact pattern that was trained over time. That's why two landlords can have the same type of tenant and completely different outcomes. Because one tenant trained structure, because one trained structure and the other trained uncertainty. That's the difference. And that's why it's not a tenant problem. Hell, it's not even a leadership problem anymore. It's a feedback loop problem. Your system produces behavior. That behavior produces outcomes. Those outcomes reinforce your system. And if you don't break that loop, you stay in it. So now we shift again, because this is where application actually gets real. Not theory, not awareness, correction. You don't just define triggers. You correct the patterns that already exist. That's step one. You look at your property honestly and ask, where have I been inconsistent? Where have I allowed delay? Where have I responded differently to the same situation? Where have I taught tenants that something can wait? Because every one of those answers is behavior you trained. And until you correct it, you will keep paying for it. Then you reset expectations. Not softly, not vaguely, clearly. You tell tenants exactly what matters now, exactly what gets reported immediately, exactly what gets handled differently moving forward. And more importantly, you follow through every time. Because the fastest way to retrain behavior is consistency, not intensity, consistency. Same trigger, same response, same standard, no variation, no mood, no delay. That's how you rebuild control without going backwards into force. Then you reinforce it fast. Every early report gets acknowledged. Every correct action gets recognized. Every aligned behavior gets confirmed. Because now you're not managing a property, you're reshaping behavior in real time. And once that shift happens, everything starts changing. Communication tightens, issues show up earlier, tenants move with more awareness, and the property stabilizes. Not because people changed, but because the system did. That's the real upgrade. Not better tenants, better training. Not stricter rules, better consistency. Not more control, better clarity. Train, protect, prosper. This is the gold mine way. I teach before I tax. I partner before I punish. I build people, therefore I protect property. That's not motivation. That's mechanics. So when you look at your property now, don't just ask what's going wrong. Ask what behavior led to it. Ask what patterns allowed it. Ask what response trained it. That's where the real fix is. Not at the moment it breaks, but in the pattern that built it. You're not dealing with random problems. You're dealing with trained outcomes. Change what's being trained, and the outcomes change with it.